You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, and welcome to your weekly dose of all things haunted and historical. Haunted Histories, here, only on Parasearch Radio. If you don't know, my name is Penny G. Morgan, and I will be your host for the next 60 minutes or so. Last week, we spoke with the absolutely fabulous Anita of Ghostly Goings On about Woodchester Mansion, and I am sure, if you haven't been before, listening to that show would make you want to visit there pretty damn quickly. Although a friend of mine who has never ever done an investigation and admits the thought of it does scare them, well, the shit out of her, to be quite honest, said that she actually was a bit nervous of ever doing one after listening to Anita describing the cellar and the feeling of a dog moving around your legs. What do you mean you didn't hear the show? Shame on you! Don't worry, you can go and listen to all of the Parasearch shows at any time via the Spreaker link and YouTube. But as I'm the one who's told you that, make sure you listen to mine first. Deal? This week, we're heading down south to Cornwall, and a place that holds a special place in the hearts of a lot of investigators for its dramatic skyline and its proximity to a large moorland area. The place being Bodmin Gaol. In about 15 or so minutes, we'll be joined by Sally and Alex of Silent Voices Ghost Hunts, who are going to tell us all about their experiences of the jail. And also, we may talk about some of the experiences I personally have had there. One thing I will say about Bodmin Gaol is that it's not somewhere you necessarily have to go to after dark to experience something you cannot explain. All of my occurrences there happen during the day and with other people around. It's chock full of different energy. It's amazing. So let's look, before we talk to Sally and Alex, let's look at the history of the jail and perhaps look into reasons why there is just still so much going on there. Well, it was first opened in 1779 after it was built by French even, prisoners of war. Sorry about that. It was something of a novelty when it came to the custodial system, as it had individual cells for prisoners, but its design included an additional county jail for what they'd call felons, i.e. serious offenders, a debtor's prison, and a house of correction for what you would look at as minor offenders. The ideas of the buildings were put together by Sir John Call Bart JP MP, based on the plans and ideals of the prison reformer John Howard. It was seen to be light and airy and therefore healthy, with its different isolated areas for felons, misdemeanants and debtors. Men and women were totally segregated, which, if you remember my show earlier this year about Kilmainham Jail in Dublin, wasn't always the case. There was hot water, a chapel, an infirmary for sick prisoners, and those individual sleeping cells. But it wasn't long before the powers that be realised that Bodmin just wasn't a large enough facility. The cells, which were designed for individuals, are fast turning into multiple occupancy, and an extension had to be built. Some may think this was due to a crime wave at the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, but this crime spree wasn't just due to an abnormally large number of miscreants suddenly appearing in the southwest, but the actual impact of poverty And also the new view of magistrates that any type of crime, no matter how small, was to be punished severely. This meant that more and more people were being sent to Bodmin Gaol. There is also, almost amusingly, I thought it was quite amusing, there is a record of Bodmin having started its very own basic neighbourhood watch scheme, the Bodmin Association. As the very Christian Cornish town was getting fed up with their orchards being scrumped, vegetable patches looted, loose women parading about the town — I don't mean the presenters on the ITV lunchtime show Loose Women — and people being drunk and disorderly in the streets. So magistrates changed what used to be short, sharp shock sentences into something a whole lot more longer term and serious. For example, John Atkins got 2 months hard labour. Hard labour being anything from walking the treadmill to rock breaking to various other things. Do you know what for? Stealing his friend's shoes. 2 months. So in the late 1850s, the prison was in effect rebuilt, and the new naval block, as it is known, was erected. Now, if you go to visit this building, you will see it's a derelict shell, this old naval block. But when it was first used, there would have been heavy slate walkways balanced on the metal supports that you can still see protruding from its old walls. The cells were stacked 4 stories high, and the light would have been all that came in naturally. In other words, not a lot. When you look at the designs of these cells, which you can do at Bodmin, they were certainly bleak. Prisoners would get a bar of soap to wash once a week, and their possessions would be few enough to fit on 2 tiny slate corner shelves. But as was the belief in the Victorian era, the darkness and the solitude gave them time to reflect on their misdemeanours. The Debtors Act of 1869 abolished the imprisonment for debt, and the prison had spare space all of a sudden. It was then that the Navy, the Admiralty, took over part of the facility, eventually occupying an entire wing, closing the prison down eventually in 1920, closing their naval unit down in 1922. The jail was closed completely in 1927 and ended the last county jail in Cornwall. The nearest probably now being the, I would say, equally scary and equally based on a moor, Dartmoor. Over its time, Bodmin the jail itself is believed to have executed over 50 individuals, with many of these being large public events. It was somewhere that William Marwood perfected his technique of what's known as the long drop. This was so that the person died, as opposed to just hung and slowly suffocating to death. Whilst any type of hanging is horrible to consider, especially when people were hung for arson, even without harm to an individual. There is a case of someone who was hung for accidentally setting fire to a hay bale, because it was seen that the damage caused meant that the farmer wouldn't be able to feed their cattle, and therefore it could cause harm to individuals. One woman, Sarah Polgreen, poisoned her husband with arsenic. Now back then, this crime was still seen as petty treason, so she was taken to the gallows on a hurdle. In other words, this kind of, I suppose, rudimentary sled-type construction, rather than in one of the sort of old-fashioned carts that you see with straw on the bottom with lots of other prisoners. And then she would have been hung after the embarrassment of being drawn through the village on a hurdle. 57-year-old William Hocking was executed in 1834 for the crime of bestiality. If you don't know what bestiality is, go ask your mum. Bestiality fell under the same law back then as homosexuality, or sodomy as it was then known, and this was a capital offence until 1861. It's amazing. So Marwood's long drop in 1872 made the dispatch of prisoners far swifter, and actually ensured that their necks were broken, as opposed to, as I said, they just hung for a very long time. It came after the 1868 Act, which made executions private and not a public event anymore, and ensured, because of this faster, I suppose, dispatch of a prisoner, that the event was a lot less traumatic for the prison staff who were forced to watch and witness each and every one. Marwood was so well known that children even had a little rhyme for him. If Pa killed Ma, then who'd kill Pa? Ma would. Shows that a dark sense of humour is nothing new, I guess. Would you like to hear the recount of an execution? God, you're a gory lot, aren't you? This is the details of an execution of the Lightfoot brothers in Bodmin in 1840. Are you ready? I'll begin. By 9 o'clock, several thousand people had taken their places in the valley near the railway and in the adjoining fields. Soon after, the executioner, Mr. George Mitchell, a respectable dairy farmer from Ilchester in Somerset, came out on the drop and fixed the ropes, which passed over two hooks in two cranes branching from the wall. A portion of the raised path immediately in front of the gaol was very judiciously barricaded, not only to prevent any rush or pressure at the gateway, but also for the purpose of enclosing the place of burial appointed for the criminals, and of avoiding any unseemly disturbance near them in their last moments. A police force was stationed near this spot, consisting of the captain and 16 other members of the sheriff's troop, 8 other constables of Bodmin, and a policeman of Wadebridge. These arrangements were all conducted under the direction of the acting under-sheriff, a Philip Prothero Smith, Esquire, of Truro, aided by the mayor of Bodmin, C. Coode, Esquire. In accordance with the usual practice, a divine service was held at the chapel. At 10 o'clock, the condemned criminals entered the chapel, each stooping and lifting, with his hand, the burden of the massive fetters in which his legs were bound. They took their seats together in a recess which was screened from the view of all others in the chapel, except the clergyman when standing at the altar. Presently the body of the chapel was filled with male prisoners in their prison dresses of dark brown and yellow. In the gallery were the debtors, some inmates, and part of the sheriff's troop. In the centre of one side of the gallery is the reading desk, where the chaplain Reverend Francis Kendall took his place. He was accompanied by the Reverend Molesworth, Reverend Francis Cole, Reverend Nicholas Kendall, and Reverend N. Kendall, Jr., the acting under-sheriff, the coroner, and the governor of the gaol, John B. Everest. The service concluded at about 11:30, after the chapel had emptied. The two Lightfoots approached and knelt before the altar to receive the sacrament. By the time of the execution, the crowd had grown to an estimated 20 to 25,000 people. This included trains which were halted below the prison wall, so that the passengers, estimated at around 1,100, could watch the hangings without leaving the wagons. Just before 12 o'clock, the prisoners were brought to the place of execution. The executioner then proceeded to place the ropes and put the caps on the prisoners. William Lightfoot then asked for the Reverend Francis Cole, who was in attendance with some other clergymen, to come near, and spoke to him as follows. "Tell my wife and family that I die happy. Beg them to go to church and keep the Sabbath, not to go in the way that I have gone, and brought myself to ruin. Tell them to avoid idleness and get their living honestly, and pray that they may meet me in heaven." After which Mr. Cole turned to James Lightfoot and asked him if he had anything more to say. He, following up his brother's words, said, "Say that I am happy. They," meaning his wife and children, "must pray to God that we meet in heaven." Immediately after the drop fell, and their souls were launched into eternity. Now, you may wonder why I've read all of that out, that particular story, the Lightfoot brothers, and what on earth is paranormal about two men being hung. Well, these brothers were executed for the murder of someone called Neville Norway. Now, Detective Jackson, the officer who arrested them, wrote in his report that the murder of Neville Norway must have taken place at about 10:30 p.m. on February the 8th. At exactly 1 minute before that time, a Captain Edmund Norway, master of the merchant ship Orient, 7 miles off St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean, woke up with a start. He told the second officer, Mr. Wren, "I had a dreadful dream. I dreamt that my brother Neville was murdered by 2 men on the road from Bodmin to Wadebridge. One fired a pistol twice, but I heard no report. Then he then knocked my brother from his horse, stuck him several blows around the head, then ran away and left him." Wren advised him, "Don't worry about it. You West Country people are just too superstitious." On February the 9th, 1840, just a day after the murder, Captain Norway recorded his dream and conversation with Wren in the ship's log. Spooky, huh? Now on that note, let's move on. And now we're joined by Sally and a poorly Alex from Silent Voices Ghost Hunt. We just have to say, if you start hearing a male voice coughing and stuff in the background, he'd like to tell you all he's possessed by someone who's got the plague or something similar. So, you know, and what you can't see is I can see them on camera while I'm saying this, and they're trying not to laugh. But we had to persuade Alex to come in on the interview because of the fact he keeps coughing. So, you know, don't let us down, Alex.
I won't. Rob best.
Well, hi guys, thanks ever so much for joining us. The reason we're going to be chatting is to do with the amazing Bodmin Gaol. But before that, because I'm nosy and because a lot of people who listen to this show are nosy, how did you both get into the paranormal in the first place?
Well, I started from a very young age. I've always been fascinated with the books, reading up about stories, wanting to learn more. I used to pick up books and just read them until they scared me so much I had to put them down for a couple of weeks, really. But I always came back to them, always fascinated by the different stories and history and locations. It really played with my imagination.
Right.
For me, I've had experiences ever since I was very little, about 6 years old. Used to keep a lot of the experiences to myself until there was one occasion that up from my grandmother's house, I was in a park with my sister, and it was just me and her. It was quite eerie. And I witnessed a man stood in white as I looked, and then he disappeared. Mm-hmm. And didn't think really much of it, and then carried on playing, and exactly the same place, a man dressed in black. I still to this day don't really know what it meant or who it was, but it frightened me enough, and I ran down the hill to my grandmother's house, and I was kind of freaked out, and she then sat me down and explained a lot about ghosts and apparitions and things. And the fact that I saw what I did, she said that I may have a gift that she had. And years and years and years after that, I then went into mediumship, and that's what I do now. So I have experiences all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So what made you set up Silent Voices, your company?
Well, I set up a group over back in Hampshire, possibly about, 10 years ago now. And we ran small time ghost hunts over there, and that didn't work out so well. Everyone from the group moved on. I moved back down to Devon, and I just had this urge to really start something new again. So I started up. I missed it. I missed getting out into the locations. I missed the ghost hunt, the excitement of going out for the creepy night. So I spoke to Sally, really, and said to her, look, let's give this a go. Let's give this a shot. And she was like, well, that's not going to work.
I laughed. I went, really? I said, people aren't going to be into that. And then he was like, well, why don't we just give it a go? So I did set up the Facebook page that we have now. And I said, well, right, okay, we'll set it up and we'll just see how popular it is before we make any decisions. And overnight, we watched the numbers grow. Literally, overnight, we were just watching them go up and up and up and up and up. We still do now.
And we started our first event, and I believe our first event, Fulford Manor, 25 people. And we thought, oh, this is wonderful. This is great. And we were really excited to walk in. We walked in, there's 25 people sat there. Off we go with the most enthusiastic, very nervous, excited voice. We're like, who's ready for a good night ghost hunting? Not a sound. Nobody said a word.
It was probably
tumbleweed.
It really was. It was the hardest grip we've ever had.
But I'll tell you what, some of the people there had a great night. They actually came back and did a couple more afterwards. And...
Yeah, we had some. We've still got some people that still follow us from that group, which is fantastic.
And so, how long ago was this? When did you do your first one?
4 years ago.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So,
out of all the places you've investigated, and I know we were talking before we started recording that this is the common question that friends and that ask you. What's been the most nerve-wracking place for you? The place that you almost wanted to run out of?
Fort Widley for me.
Oh, right. What, in Portsmouth way? That's Portsmouth way, isn't it? Yeah.
Because it's all underground tunnels, and dark and cold and creepy, and I go into locations blind. I don't like to look up the history before I go in because I want to see what I pick up on.
Sure.
Then we look up the history afterwards. And that place was absolutely amazing. And even the most skeptical member of our team, who pretty much says everything is not paranormal, he went down there to set up some cameras with Alex. And he had his own experience down there, came up pretty sharpish. Brilliant. And for him to tell me that he had seen someone down there, and we know no one was down there.
Yeah.
That got me, I want to go down there now. Let's get going. And from pretty much the start to the end of that investigation, we had all sorts of things happening, disembodied footsteps and screams and lights and things happening, their lights, not ours, going on and off for no reason, our equipment going off, our torches reacting to something around us and responding intelligently. So that was probably for me the most scariest location. And the most active location.
And as a medium then, did you pick up on that the soldiers and maybe they didn't want you there because you were a woman? Because that's what I've picked up on before when I've gone into forts. It's almost like I shouldn't be there because I'm a woman.
Yeah, well, they did have women down there. Afterwards, we did sort of a bit of research, and there were women down there. But the female scream that we heard, and we caught it on camera as well. And everybody else had sort of cameras down the tunnels that they were in, so we checked to see if it was any other group. And only other one camera captured the scream, but they didn't hear it with their own ears.
Right.
So we heard it with our own ears, and you see our reaction on camera, but it was a blood-curdling scream. And then after we did a bit of research, and we found out there were torture chambers and things like that down there as well.
Wow.
And then we were kind of picking up. I was picking up of a young child that a young boy had died by accident there. I picked up on a female, and I do feel that it was the lady that screamed, and I feel that she was asking for help. That there was a lot of other energies there that were also asking for help. And I picked up on a not so good energy that was down one of the tunnels. And I think that's what you're saying, like the soldiers saying that, you're female, you're not meant to be here, you need to go. So sort of a push out, you're not meant to be here. So yeah, there was a lot going on down there. It was so
one
busy.
One of the things we face in locations is, not in all cases, but there's quite a few times we come across where the owners or the proprietors of the property has asked us not to move the spirits on. And when we're faced with a situation like this, where there's a spirit asking for help to be pushed over or to be pulled away from this cold, dark way, what do we do in that situation?
We've come across a couple of locations that have said we don't want cleansing, clearings, or anything like that, and we have to respect that. But on the other hand, we think to ourselves, well, why would you want to keep an energy here that doesn't want to be here? Because you can't force them to do anything that they don't want to. But if they are stuck or they can't find their way or something like that, and you have, the ability to be able to help them, I'm more inclined to help them.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame you. I mean, one of the ones I did once, we had a young boy who was absolutely terrified. We think he'd been, he was a murder victim. We know that. And he was terrified. And he was scared that the person, there was something there that was holding him back, not in a good way. Yeah. So one of my colleagues who could do that, she as she put it, she said, "Don't tell anyone, but I'm taking him home with me to help him on." Because how can you not, if you've got a child begging you for help?
Yes, yeah.
How can you not help them? It's inhumane.
We had a couple of team members that left after Fort Whitley because it was such. I think it made it real for them. The experiences that we had, it was too much for them, and we did a little bit of a group session down there to help this woman and a child. And it was so profound with the experiences that we were having whilst helping. And none of the team members have ever seen me do that kind of work before. So for them to see what was happening and the responses we were getting and the feelings they were receiving.
Most of the team walked out with, wow.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
A couple of the team members were like, I can't do any more. That was too much for me. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's not a problem, because there was something holding the energies there, for its own gain. And that's what made them go, well, you need to go back. You need to solve it. You need to fix it. And I said, well, I don't need to, because once the good energies that have asked for help have been released, there's nothing left for them to hold on to.
Yeah.
It would just disperse.
But part of our investigation, and we call ourselves paranormal investigators across the board, anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
And we should be investigating and learning as we go. One of the things we learned from was demonstrated throughout that experience of that night is it depends on your personal output, shall I say, of how you feel, how you are as an individual can affect the experience you have within these places. So if you're generally a happy, outgoing, confident person and you go into these places, you're going to have a very happy, confident experience with spiritual energies. If you're a very negative, and when I say negative, I don't say anyone is a negative person. I never ever attack their character. Everyone I've met is a lovely person, but people do carry negative aspects to their being. And if they go in with this negative outlet, they're going to receive a very different message back from the same energy that they experience from the person next door. So it was strange that we all experienced this wonderful experience, but this particular person didn't enjoy it, so to speak.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is your most nerve-wracking place Fort Whitley as well, Alex?
I tell you the truth, I can't think of a most nerve-wracking place. I absolutely thrive to get in anywhere. and just I can't really say I've come across an absolute nerve-wracking place. If you leave me in a room on my own, disappear down the hallway, I get nervous. But
I must say, it's a question I get asked by friends. Have you ever been scared? And I was like, no, I have genuinely never been scared. I've been unnerved a few times, like, whoa, what was that? I got touched recently at one that I did. Someone squeezed my shoulder, and there was no one there, and it was a squeeze. And I was a bit like, "Wow, what was that?" Because I didn't expect it. But no different. It was no different to if someone had done it in the street to me, and I wasn't expecting them to squeeze my. It was that same reaction, if you get what I mean. But it wasn't like, I've got to leave this room. I'm scared. I'm terrified. It was more like, come on, come and talk to me. Then stop, messing around. But I actually want to be scared. I want somewhere that actually makes me, scared. But I haven't yet, and I'm waiting. Okay, let's take a quick sort of 30 second break, so you two can go and get yourselves a drink or something, and say we'll be back in about 30 seconds.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Right, we're back. We're still joined with the lovely Sally and Alex of Silent Voices Ghost Hunt. We've just been talking about some of the experiences that they've had, and Fort Widley was one of the ones that Sally mentioned. But I think we should get on to Bodmin Gaol, as that's what we're going to be talking about on this show. Now, I've visited Bodmin Gaol as just a day visitor on a couple of occasions, and it's an amazing construction. It's got so much energy flowing through it, even now. It is somewhere I would love to investigate one day. You've been there quite a few times, I understand.
Yeah, we started investigating Bodmin Gaol about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the first time we went in, it's just amazing. I mean, even on the walk around when we were viewing it before we booked it, mm-hmm. and we were given a little bit of a tour just to show us where we would be able to take people, etc. And we took EVP recorders and things like that because we like to sort of see if we can pick anything up. And we went round, and it was amazing. It's mind blowing, you know. Just you get to feel all the energies around, and they've got all the mannequins, and they give you a bit of insight, obviously, of what may have happened, and I think that's brilliant. They've got all the stories of everything there as well. So our first night's investigation was, for me, exciting and a little bit unnerving, especially when the lights went out, because it's literally pitch black. You cannot see your hand in front of your face when the lights go out, which is really, really, really good, because some of the experiments we do have to be as dark as you can get it to be able to see anything light form move around you without cameras and things. But each time we've gone, the experiences have happened more and more and more. Like, we've built up a relationship with spiritual energies there, where they kind of get to know you, and they feel safe to be able to show themselves and communicate with you and talk to the guests as well. So it's just a fantastic place. We do really love Bodmin Gaol. It's fantastic. Yeah.
I know. I'll say that I've been there a few times as a visitor during the day, and I've had experiences there just in the daylight when loads of other people are around me. And one of them was I subsequently found out later. I was waiting to look in this cell that had a display in it. I knew it was a woman, and as I was waiting, I had a voice in my ear say something along the lines of, "I couldn't help it. I had no choice," almost sounding like she wanted forgiving. And when I went up to the cell, it was a woman who'd, I think she'd drowned or something, her disabled child because of some bloke. I mean, I think you mentioned her name. Was it Selena Wage?
Wage, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a very, very prominent energy in the jail. And there is now actually a display there for her, talking about her story. So it's like a hologram, and we've made this big cell all about the story that happened, where she had her disabled child, and there's a well and a display of a well.
Yeah.
And you walk past it and it switches on and it tells you about her story as if she's talking to you.
Right.
Which is absolutely fantastic. It's such a good thing to have there. But she's a very, very strong energy there. I've had experiences there. Again, this is the daytime when we went there. And where she got hung, which was where you said you had your experiences, was just literally 20 steps away.
10 steps
away. from the conditioned cell,
Right.
is there's like an archway where she would have been hung, and we were stood under the archway having a look around, and there's a fire door there. And as I walked out and I went to shut the fire door, I saw a man that was stood behind the fire door, hiding his face and kind of crouched over as if he was crying. And then I was like, who is that? And I went to go see, because we were on our own. So I went to go and ask who that might have been, and there was no one there. So we don't really know if maybe that might have been someone that was connected to her, that where she got hung, they couldn't look, and it was... Well, it
wasn't until later that I read in one of the books I came across that that Selena's hanging was actually a massive effect on the people, affected the people in the area. So it could possibly have been an energy
portraying that,
replaying that scene. It is open to interpretation, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, a lot of things with this are. But I mean, would you have you had any guests that Selena's tried to communicate with, or has she communicated with yourselves at all?
Not with myself. I mean, I know Mark, who does the tours, and he does his own events there, the After Dark events. He's had a very profound experience, which he calls the Crossroads, which there's a long room that goes into where the museum area is, and then there's another bit that takes you off, but it's like a bit of a crossroad. And he walked along there, and she showed herself to him in a full apparition, walked straight past him, didn't even acknowledge him, and he was taken aback a bit on the experience, but so much so that he was like, I really, really want to get some sort of CCTV camera in the Crossroads, because it seems to be that area that's quite active.
Yeah. Because, I mean, the thing is with Selena's story, I remember when I was reading up, and after I'd heard it was after I heard this voice, I started reading the stuff that was about her. I didn't feel judgmental, if that makes sense. It's all right. The dogs are agreeing.
Postman's just knocked at the door.
You'll probably hear mine go in a minute as well, but I didn't feel judgmental towards her. I felt sorry for her that she had to make that kind of choice, or that was the only choice. Because I think, I mean, one of my favourite periods of history to look at is things like the workhouse movements and all those kind of things, because a lot of people think workhouses were abhorrent. But if you had no way of earning any money, and it was a choice of either go into the workhouse or die of starvation, which would you choose? And I think it's hard for people now to understand there was a period when the welfare state didn't exist. That you know, and Selena had the choice of, I think, being with saving one child and being with someone who would look after her and her child, or being on the street and possibly starving to death.
But having her children go through the workhouse, you have the workhouse threat as well, you know.
But that's what I was saying. The workhouse to me wasn't as bad as people think it is, because it did offer people a lifeline. It was kind of an early version of the welfare state. But, you know, I know that they treated disabled children very, very badly in them. So,
so she would either have two children that would be starving and possibly dying, or letting go of one child and saving the other, which many people do, even to this day. When you've got a risk through pregnancy and things like that, you know, and you're given that option, that's still sort of the same thing. You know, what are you going to do? Are you going to save one child or let both of them go? And I think that was her choice.
And bear in mind, in the workhouses as well, once a child reached, I think it was 6, they were taken away from their parent. So even if she was in the workhouse with a disabled child, she wouldn't have been able to look after them, because they didn't take the disability into account back then. So I just thought, what, you know, I suppose if she'd killed both of her children, it might have been a bit different. But the fact that she killed one to try and save the other, how can you judge her in a? The only way you can sort of look at it is in a, what a hell of a decision to have to try and make.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way. Maybe that's why she spoke to me, because that was how I was thinking.
So do you suggest that people go to Bodmin Gaol and just give her a little bit of love? Give
Yeah.
her, don't go in there with
Positive
judgment.
energy, lots and lots of love. Give her some positive energy, and she will respond to that.
Yeah.
If people go in and do give her the judgment that she doesn't want, she won't respond.
Or doesn't deserve, I don't believe, because I don't think anyone put in that kind of position would have done it without some kind of due process in their heads. You know, it's not something that...
Because not only that, imagine how horrific it would have been for her to actually do that act, knowing that she had no choice.
Yeah.
It must have absolutely destroyed her.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. And she's still looking for forgiveness now, 200 years on.
Exactly.
One of the other bits of it that I found quite unnerving, for me anyway, was where they've got a load of the very, very old-fashioned cells. And I know they had a display about... I think there were some blokes who'd blown something up in there or something, but it was a very oldie-worldy cell area, very thick grey stone. And in there, I felt I was being pushed back out, that something was kind of almost like there was a it wasn't quite like someone pushing me, but there was a force, if you like, not wanting me to come through that door. And I also had my hair flicked in that bit as well.
Can you remember what level it was on?
I can't. I was so disorientated walking around, if I'm completely honest. I know it was a really old grey stone bit, and it had loads of mannequins in all the cells, and it also had a display about some bloke he'd murdered this baby with and they found the cord or something that was round its throat. But it was nowhere in there did that was probably the worst area. That was the bit that I didn't like. But
sounds like the long room. With the long room, I've had two extreme emotional feelings in there. I've gone into that room when they've been doing table work and had this feeling of dread and hate and just horrible. We're getting actually quite negative works through our ovulus at that time. But a completely different occasion where I've gone in, they've been doing table work, I've just burst into laughter and was so happy and excited in exactly the same area. Yeah. So I think it all depends on what energy's around when you enter. You may have entered it during a very depressed, negative aspect rather than one of the most exciting ones.
We tend to get children in there as well.
We do get a lot of children in
there. We get children in the long room, and a lot of our guests get a lot of experiences with the children, because children feel, I suppose maybe like children today, they feel that they can communicate and they can just come up to you and they can talk to you. So they do come forward very easily. And we've had people, complete non-believers, that have come in and they've had their trouser legs tugged, their trousers tugged. And they feel like their hand has had a small hand hold on to them. And one guy, he came up to us and he was completely shocked. And he sort of said, I know I had that experience and I know I saw him. And he said to me, what do I do with that? And I kind of said, the experience that you had was for you, because it was you that saw him, it was you that felt him, and it was your trouser leg that he tugged on. I said, what you do with that is completely up to you. You can process it, you can believe it, you can accept it, or you can later on go find some logical explanation and go with that. What you do when you walk out of those doors is your own interpretation of your own experience. And he said, okay. I said, but this does become quite addictive. Once you've had an experience, you want more and you want to know more and you want the answers. And it wasn't long before he returned to Bodmin Gaol. And wanted to have the same experience again. And I did say to him, you won't have exactly the same experience. You never do there. Every experience is so different.
Well, my favourite experience with the table in the long room was absolutely blew my mind. I left laughing. we had the table tipping going on, and the table doesn't half move, and when it goes. And it moved over to the walls, but in the pitch blackness, I wasn't even on the table this time. I was stood separate, and you could hear knocking on the table, clear, like, well, I can't even proper knocking a wooden table, and everyone's like, "That's not me doing it. That's not me." And I was like, "Yeah, someone on the table's knocking that. They must be." So I went over to there and I shone my torch directly onto the top of the table, so you could see everyone's hands flat on the table. And I asked to knock again. 2 clear knocks came through again in response. Nobody's hand moved.
And we had another guy that had a torch underneath the table.
He was looking under the table to make sure nobody, and we were still getting the knocks in response. Wow. And it was like someone knocking on literally a wooden table, just knock, knock, knock. And we asked him to knock 3 times, asked him to knock twice, and once we finished that session, the guy who was looking under the table and was checking everyone's position. He says, "To tell you the truth, mate, I thought the whole night was a load of rubbish until that happened."
Yeah.
And he goes, "I'm happy with that."
The table tipping, but it's almost as if they come out and they love playing with it.
Yeah.
And we've had people singing nursery rhymes, and we've had our equipment going off at the same time that the table's going around. And there was one occasion that I put, because they were playing with torchlights for a while. So I put a torchlight at the other end of the long room, and then we were on the table. There was 2 really tall guys, and they were like looking underneath for strings and motors and things, and they were like, "I just can't see how this is happening."
Yeah.
And I'm kind of giggling because, I see people do it all the time. So I said, "Okay, let's try this." So I said, if you're around in this room, can you turn the torchlight off? And considering nobody was anywhere near this torchlight, it went off on command. And these 2 guys, they were like freaking out. And they said, "Mate, if that torchlight comes back on, I'm gone." And as he said that, the torchlight came back on and they were gone. They actually left.
Brilliant. Well, see, that's one of my dream experiences to have, the torch going on and off. That is one of my goals, if you get what I mean, of paranormal stuff to have. But I said to you earlier that my husband's doing his first investigation soon in a few weeks, and he's actually said if something like that happens, he will be running up the runway of the airfield we're going to be on at a rate of knots, and that's how he's going to keep warm, because he's probably going to be running away every 5 seconds, and I'm going to have to go and catch him. But
is this Stowe Airfield?
Sorry?
Is this Davistow?
No, it's Doncaster Air Museum we're going to. I'm based in Essex, so I've done other airfields around the country. I've done a few World War II bomber base ones and all that, and but yeah, that's the one we're doing, the first one we're doing, and it's got so many old aircraft there as well. You've got a lot of things attached to the aircraft that are there in the museum. So, but he's already said that he's not going to worry about wearing thermals because he'll be running up the runway half the time to get away.
We got an interesting EVP at an airfield.
Yeah, we do Davistow Airfield, which is just on Bodmin Moor.
All right.
And we had an EVP set up in the hangar where they've got all the old planes and everything. And we got a couple of knocks and bangs, which we do tend to get quite a lot on EVPs. And then there was this really, really profound sound that almost sounded like an airplane engine going past our EVP recorder, and then it was shut off, so you could hear the engine shutting down.
Oh, wow.
And there was no one else on that site apart from us. There was only literally a few of us. And nobody else heard that noise. There was no planes flying over. There was no trucks or anything driving past. And we could not explain where that noise had come from. It really did sound like an aeroplane engine coming into the hangar and then being shut.
Brilliant catch.
It was awesome.
So with Bodmin Gaol, obviously you have got the moor nearby as well, which has got its own history and things, gruesome things that have been discovered there. In fact, I rode a horse across there once and she dumped me unceremoniously on some rocks. So I've got my own sort of tale to tell about Bodmin Moor. But with the jail, are there any areas in there that you do have to be careful when you go in from a spiritual perspective.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had my own experience. I mean, I've always ran these events. I've never been on an event that's been ran before until I asked Mark, who's the medium there, if I could go on one of his events. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. But he does his events completely different to us. He doesn't use equipment. And I wanted to experience how he does his. And so we did go, and we did a lot of energy work, which was absolutely brilliant. We felt our own energy, each other's energy, before we even started to communicate with spiritual energy. So that was really, really good. And they've changed the levels now because they've got new parts of the jail being done.
All right.
So what I used to see as level 4 was very interesting to me. We were just up there. There was a gate behind him at the time, and he was calling in the energies to stand by the gate. I was right opposite him.
I swapped places with you, didn't I?
Yeah, because I couldn't really see what other people were seeing. So Alex said, let's swap places. I'm stood right opposite him, and he then opens the gate. And at the time he opened the gate, I felt an energy come up against me, but I couldn't focus, and I kind of went a bit disorientated, like you said. That's why I was kind of like, what level was it on? And I felt very strange after that. And Mark does this thing. If he thinks that something's happening to you that you're not quite sure of, he has a torch, and he'll put the torch on and flash it at you, which is what he did. And I kind of came to. And he looked at me and he said, your eyes started to glaze over. So I just thought I'd check, sort of thing. And I said, okay. We went on to the next session, and I just didn't feel right. I knew something was with me or trying to attach itself to me. I don't know. And for me, I'm normally quite protected because I do this all the time. And after that, we went downstairs, and I felt sick. I had a headache. I felt like I was going to pass out. So one of my friends that came with me on that time ran out to Mark and said, Sally's not feeling right. So he came in, stood behind me, didn't touch me. He waved. He just had his hands over my shoulders. And as he was doing that, I saw my focus come back in. My headache went. I stopped feeling sick. And he said, you'll be all right now. And then he went to go on to the next session. And I was too nervous to go and do the next session because of how I was affected on that level. I was the only driver home as well, so I freaked out a bit. Thought, well, if something happens to me again, we're not getting home. So I called it a night after that, and I actually left early because it freaked me out. So I feel that level 4 has definitely an energy there that you need to be careful of. That if you go up, you just need to protect yourself a little bit more. And then we've also got the basement area, which I call the isolation area, that seems to be quite active at the moment.
A lot of people go into Bodmin Gaol with the thought they're going to be attacked by prisoners, and they always focus prisoners. But they don't pay attention to the guards. And there are guard spirits there. And I think they have an authority, not a bullying type attitude, but they can be quite aggressive themselves, some of them.
Yeah, I agree. I did a show on Kilmainham Jail in Ireland last.
Oh my God, I wanted to go there.
Well, you can't actually they won't allow you to investigate it. The Irish government. I was
going to go there as a daytime tour thing.
Oh, I've done it twice. It's an amazing place. But most of the accounts of hauntings, or negative hauntings, shall we say, has been guard attributed. It's been the stompy boots of guards. It's been the yelling. It's been the authoritarian type thing. So yeah, I would agree exactly with what you're saying there, Alex. That people tend to think it's the prisoners that are going to have a go at them. It's not. It's the guards who had to try and keep control. And a lot of them were allowed to get away with whatever they wanted to. You know, there was no kind of recourse. If you hit a prisoner in the head with your whatever it would have been, not truncheon then, but whatever they would have used, nobody was going to do you for a breach of health and safety or whatever. It was,
There's
you know,
one indication at Bodmin Gaol that keeps reoccurring. It's happened on several occasions now, and that's the smell of sulphur or struck matches.
hmm
And it's always that you've had it in the naval wing, that smell.
And it was in the guards room.
And it was in the guards room. It was also in the crossover area from the long room.
I thought that was part of the display because I could smell that too when I was there.
No.
I thought it was part of the display.
No.
The naval wing doesn't have any displays, and it's outside.
And it moves around. The thing is, with this, it will appear from nowhere. It will actually move around, and it usually indicates some sort of trouble. So, like, either mischievous or. So when I smell that smell, I tend to approach things a little bit more gently. And going back to where Sally was saying in the basement, the room that she's talking about, I believe, was a guard room's office.
Right.
And we've had every time we've done a session in that room, we've had to leave rather sharpishly.
It's affected our guests as well. There was a private booking that we had, and we took them down there, and we all linked arms because it's so dark down there. So we link arms so that we know where everybody is. And we've got a piece of equipment which we call the REM pod, which will pick up on energies around at the time, and it will light up lights and alarms. And there's a temperature light on there as well. And we're all linked up, and we're calling, obviously, someone to come in and communicate with us. And the REM pod started lighting up on the doorway. And so people's feelings start getting a bit nervous because they know something's coming through the door. And we're just sort of talking to each other, and we're building up the energy. And one particular lad there was doing what we don't normally do. He was goading and come on then if you think you're hard enough and all that lot, you know. And he was going and going and going. In the end, I said to him, right, I think you need to calm it, because what you're not realizing is you're goading, but we're all linked. And the weakest link is the one that will get affected, which was the girl next to him. She started getting affected, felt like a pressure on her shoulders was pushing her down. She started crying because she said it was hurting. And so I released myself from the circle, went towards her to remove the energy away from her. And at that time, I was just holding on to her. And I said 3 times, take a step back, release this circle, remove your energy. And on the 3rd time, the REM pod light went off, it went black, and she felt fine. The whole circle of people gasped and were kind of like, oh, wow. But because it was such a strong and oppressive energy, I didn't sort of say anything, but I said, right, I think we'll move on to the next bit now. Went upstairs, checked on her. She said that she felt okay when she was upstairs, but she felt that there was a big pressure on her back, on her shoulders, pushing her down, as if to put her on her knees. And the guy that was doing the goading went upstairs and went, well, I wanted it to happen to me. And I said, well, what you'll find is that things won't happen to you if you are a strong energy. Always find the weakest link. Always. So a couple of things like that have happened down there in that room. And we've also had a very, very, very loud pop. Everybody was linked, so we don't know where that come from. And it made everybody jump. And you did a bit of research on it, didn't you, to find out if there was anything like that in paranormal experiments. And apparently it's the loud pop is a burst of energy.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
And that was I've never experienced that before, but it was very loud, and it was it just sounded like a bubble pop. Everybody jumped and freaked out, and that was enough for them. They took their money's worth anyway.
Well, that means Bodmin is now on my to-do list as well. My to-do list is getting bigger and bigger the more people I speak to. Well, we've been talking for nearly 3/4 of an hour, so it's been an absolute pleasure meeting with you both. Thank you so much. What have you got coming up? Just quickly, we've got 60 seconds. What have you got coming up that people can have a look at?
We've got tomorrow night, actually, Friday 13th, Bodmin Gaol. We do have a couple of places left on that one. It was fully booked, but we've had a couple of cancellations. So if anybody wants to get last-minute ones. We've also got Jamaica Inn coming up on the 21st of October, which is going to be a special one. We do have Richard Felix from Most Haunted joining us on that one.
Okay.
And then we have Bodmin Gaol on the 28th of October as well.
Wonderful. And everyone can obviously go to your Facebook page, Silent Voices, Ghost Hunts, like it, and they'll be kept in touch.
Oh, absolutely. We put offers up on there all the time.
Brilliant.
We've got flash offers out at the moment for cheap deals and things like that throughout October, so it's well worth a look.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again, guys. I really, really appreciate your time. I'm just looking at the clock ticking down now. I've got about 4 seconds left. So thanks ever so much. So if you want a chance to go and visit Bodmin Gaol, do check out Silent Voices Ghost Hunts Facebook page. Give it a like, have a follow for the different events they're doing. Also, make sure that you don't forget that Parasearch Radio has shows on every single night of the week, and you can even go and listen to them after the event if you're not able to make it at 9 o'clock when they tend to go out live. But all that leaves me to say is thank you ever so much for listening to Haunted Histories on Parasearch Radio with myself, Penny G. Morgan, tonight. And have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.